Welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to be doing a desert scene here on some pre-printed papers. This one is the wood grain paper. And there is water in the desert, so I'm stamping a waterfall flanked by a couple of the boulders with lichen here. And on these pre-printed papers, just make sure that you're working with an ink or a black ink that's going to transfer onto the paper really well. Using some Brilliance White to create, you can see it as a moon or a sun, but basically a light source. And in this video, we're going to be using nature set number 31, and I'm adding in the cactus plants here. Trying to figure out the scale of these cactus here, and you know, some of my first usages of them. New set. We have the organ pipe cactus, and going for the Joshua tree. You often see different types of desert flora in a little ecosystem wherever you are. It's not a monoculture out in the deserts. So you get these different forms out there. Going for a larger Joshua tree there. And some foreground imagery. Okay, now our foundation is set here, and I'm going to be filling in with some extra texture here with the tiny rocks small. And I even use it down here in the water. I almost use it as a kind of a shading tool when you use it in repetition. When you use it in water, it will represent kind of a shallower body of water. And that's how I see these kind of ephemeral, I don't know, whatever, springs here in the deserts. Our lady rider there in the distance. Okay, now using a black colored pencil, I'm going to be shading and my forms here and adding shadows. Okay, so when you shade your rocks or other forms, like our body of water here, what we're doing is we're giving our forms more mass and opacity. And there are already different values in the stamp impressions, but what we're doing is we're reiterating it here, and we're also casting a shadow from these forms. So again, it's giving them opacity. It's saying that these forms aren't see-through, and it gives them more visual weight and definition. And you just kind of do it with a really light touch here. You know, we're using a black here, but we're using it very lightly to create different values of gray. So trying to achieve a nice grayscale value scheme in our piece. And then what you do is you add it in lightly, and if you like it, you can go darker and darker. Okay, now I'm starting to kind of develop some different tints here. I'm not really so much coloring. I mean, I am using different colored pencils here, but I'm kind of giving more of a rich kind of shadow areas to it. So in other words, I'm coloring my shaded areas for the most part, but we want to retain some of those lighter areas to represent reflected light coming from our light source. And in this case, we have a pretty light source there in that orb up in the sky. Adding in some blue down in the water, but mostly you can see I'm kind of adding it in those shaded areas there. Going back in with black here after I added in some of that color. So you kind of go back and forth. When you add in a color, you might decide, oh, I should have added a little bit more black in this area, or, you know, a deeper shade of something. Going with some browns there on those rocks, and then a little bit of a reddish tinge, you know, for those, I don't know, desert types of rocks out there, you know, with a lot of, I don't know what it is, maybe iron in the rock. Okay, going in with my white pastel pencil here. It's almost like using a piece of chalk, but it goes onto this paper really nicely. And it is chalky, so we will, I do spray seal this when I'm done. But what we're doing here is we're doing the opposite of the shading. The shading on rocks typically is on the bottom side of it, and now that we're highlighting, we're doing it on the top side. So not coloring in the whole piece, the whole rock, because the bottom part is shaded. So what we're doing is we're just adding this to the top. And then you see the bare paper kind of in the mid-ground, because it's already a given tone. So darker in the darks and lighter in the lights. And you develop your reflected light coming from that white orb up there. I've asked some of the people in the live stream, do you see that as a sun or do you see it as a moon? Yeah, and it could be either. A little bit of white pigment ink, I was just kind of adding in a little bit of a kind of a mist at the base of those little falls there. And everything was fairly soft, so I'm adding in some crisp, sparkly highlights with my acrylic white extra fine paint pen. And it's kind of subtle little, kind of sparkly highlights. Kind of brings the piece alive in some ways by adding in that crisp little element. And you're also adding in contrast into those areas. It's a textural contrast. You know, it's something nice and crisp against something a little bit soft, and you're also adding in something light against something darker. And adding in a little bit of a kind of a wildflower with that purple. All right, sand pattern on this pre-printed vintage type of paper. Okay. And this one's a quarter page, where the last one was a half page. Adding in our rocks. Going for a light source, and I like this light source on this one because I added it into that lighter area of the vintage paper. A couple Joshua trees in there. Making kind of a corridor of these Joshua trees, adding in the new couple and dog. Adding in our shadows here, and I'm going to kind of elongate the shadows, going for a little bit more drama with those shadows in this case. Some foreground grasses to kind of create a kind of a stronger lead-in point. Going in with our pastel pencil here and adding in some reflected light on those sand textures down there. If you ever add too much of that white too with the pastel pencil, you can always just wipe it off with your finger. It comes right off. Okay, and our crisp little highlights. I'll also use this for some wildflowers there on the forest floor, so I cluster some of these little dots together. And on this one, I'm kind of keeping it minimal. I thought it would look, you know, good without any color. Right here, I'm adding in some highlights on the sides of some of these Joshua trees. And I'm adding it on the side of the Joshua trees that are facing the light. So they're on one side of the tree, on one side of the page, and on the other side of the page, okay? Just to reiterate that lighting direction. Light and reflected light. All right, these are my pieces here. Fun little experiment on the pre-printed papers with the new nature set. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching.